Hello and welcome to Artificial. In this video, I'm going to walk you through some of our key features so you can understand what our software does and how we can help you. The best way to think about Artificial is as a whole lab orchestrator and scheduler. We coordinate the transfer of data and work between every piece of your lab, from your LIMS or ELN to individual instruments or integrated work cells with their own local schedulers to the human operators or lab techs you have in your lab. We do this through our web-based app, which you can access from anywhere in the world on any computer with a browser. Let's start by taking a look at a lab set up to do next-generation sequencing. Here you can see the digital twin for this lab. Somebody's already done the work to build it for us. Takes a few hours in our drag and drop editor. This lab has Hamiltons, but we're totally equipment agnostic. We're an open platform. We support a lot of the common stuff off the shelf, and we also have a self-serve driver development framework to make it really easy to connect new or custom stuff. So as an operator or lab tech, I'm going to come do some work in the lab. I can create a new job and select the workflow I want to run. In this lab, we've got one published workflow called DNA isolation. We'll talk more about workflows later, but fundamentally, they are how we define the sequences of work that need to be done by various things in the lab. Once I select a workflow, I can see a list of requests that scientists have made for me to run that workflow. What usually happens is a scientist or stakeholder who wants your lab to do some work has configured a scientific request somewhere. Oftentimes it's in the LIMS. And because we integrate with the LIMS, those requests get synced to Artificial and automatically show up in this list. So now I can pick which request or requests I want to work on. Here I can see some of the parameters the scientist entered when they created the request. For similar requests, I can actually batch these up to make sure I'm filling my equipment's plate capacity and generally optimally group them into the minimal amount of work to be done in the lab. Next, I can tweak any last-minute configuration I need to set to make sure the operations go smoothly. And finally, I can schedule this job to either run ASAP or some future date, and see the available instruments to run it and either take Artificial's recommendation or pick a different instrument if another one makes more sense. So I can see a summary of what I'm about to run, and I'm going to go ahead and run it. While it runs, let's take a look at how the workflow is defined. You write these workflows in a subset of Python that we call orchestration Python, and controlling something in your lab is as easy as calling a function. If you have folks on your team who are proficient in Python, they can write these workflows themselves, or we can also help write them. Okay, so here's the definition for the workflow we're running, and you can see it's just a function. The input parameters are those scientific parameters that we take in from the informatics system that get entered by the scientist, and these are the steps that it will take. First, we'll reach out to a human operator to get help setting up the system. This will actually send out a notification on Teams or Slack, for example, and then once they're in the lab, we'll walk them through the steps necessary to set up the system. I'll show you that in just a minute. Next, we're going to actually go out and run a method on our work cell. We integrate with most of the major schedulers, and this could also be running protocols on standalone liquid handlers or other instruments. Finally, we'll reach back out to a human operator to get help cleaning up the system once the method is complete. Okay, let's check back in on our job. So you can see it's already marked itself as assistance needed with system setup. It's already sent out that notification, so let's go ahead and run this, and I'll briefly show you the assistant player, our digital interactive SOP solution. So in this case, the interaction that is needed is to set up the system for a run with the specific set of requests that we're running. Remember, the scientific parameters flow out of the informatics system to our system. The workflow starts to run and can pass parameters into these guides. So we can get very specific guidance based off this specific job and how the requests were batched up and all sorts of other rules. We show the materials you need to collect, and again, in the exact quantities that our system has calculated for this number of sample plates based on the batching for this specific job. So when the operator sees this, it's going to be the right number. And all these calculations are done automatically behind the scenes. When I run, this will walk me through all the steps needed to set up the system. We create these really rich digital guides that essentially bind the instructions to locations in your digital twin. So if you want to make sure you put a plate in the right carrier, we can show that. You can also add images if you want to help somebody grab very specific tips or something. You can add video to help describe infrequent or fiddly tasks. Maybe have a scientist or help with error recovery. You can also capture user input by scanning barcodes or entering lot numbers, so you can track, say, which reagent batch was used for an experiment, and if you find a problem with that reagent batch, You know which data might have been affected and can isolate it. You can make these in our Assistant Editor app, which is a no-code drag and drop way to describe these instructions, and then very quickly integrate them into your workflows. We find that these assistants really help reduce operator error, help reduce training time, and help you get more structured about your SOPs. So once I'm done with the system setup, we're going to kick off running that method on our work cell. Here we're interacting with Solario, but again, this could be any work cell or any standalone piece of equipment because we're an open platform. While it's running, we can highlight equipment to show you exactly what's happening, and this workflow simulates a few errors and a bunch of other things. While that's running, I just want to show you our data record. This is a complete record of everything that's happened to the job, when it happened, who did it. It includes errors, if the job was paused, any files that are uploaded, other results, etc. You can see here's the record of that assistant that was run by me. So here are those lot numbers that I just entered. We also record those scientific parameters, of course, and you can capture notes about the job if somebody needed to do some off-roading. Any authorized user can go in here and look at the state of the system as it's running and see the data that was captured at each step in real time from anywhere in the world. So the job started, we did the system setup, and the method ran. Now it's time to clean up the system. So again, this sent that notification out via Slack or Teams or whatever, and somebody would come run the assistant, but I'm just going to mark it complete and finish up this job. And you can see the state of the lab is now back to nothing's running. So we just coordinated work across both humans and equipment. Again, in this case, a unified work cell, but could be anything. This is a fairly simple workflow, but because we write the workflows in Python, we have the full power of Python's control flow tools, like loops and branches. So let's take a look at the data record for a more complicated example, like cell culture. So here we have a cell culture workflow that takes advantage of some of the more advanced capabilities of our system. This job completed some time ago, but again, we can see this indelible data record of everything that happened during the job. So we started by getting Solario ready, calling somebody into the lab to actually load the plates into the work cell, telling Solario to put those plates into storage, and then kicking off a couple of sub-jobs to manage the plates through their imaging and refeeding cycles. And I can jump into one of these to see how that went. So you can see we incubate for a while, run an imaging order, incubate, run a refeed order, incubate, check confluency, and finally unload. In Python, that's all just a while loop with some conditions. And you can see when we run that imaging order, we're actually capturing the image and uploading it to the cloud so it becomes part of this data record, and I can just download it here. Finally, once we've unloaded the plate, we actually kick off another sub-job in a totally different lab to go run an ELISA workflow. To sum up, we've run an arbitrarily complex series of tasks across individual instruments, integrated work cells, the humans in the lab, and even across entire labs. We're gathering just-in-time data from the operators, results from the experiments we're running, consolidating that with the scientific parameters and some contextual metadata, and storing that in an indelible data record in the cloud. You can access that data record from our app from anywhere in the world, or we also have a RESTful API that you can use to programmatically get it and do whatever you want with it. So that's Artificial. In future demos, we'll do deeper dives on our lab editor for setting up your digital twin, our assistant editor for creating those interactive digital SOPs I showed you, and our SDK for writing and publishing your own workflows. Thanks for watching.